There we go. Well, I'm going to start off with a couple things. First thing I'd like to say, the first part of the talk is going to be the things that I learned from my mentors. My mentors are on the left. You might want to write some of them down if you don't know their names beforehand. I got to click got it so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, I think we're recording now. And then I noticed that on the right, I've got other people, and some of those people are on this call. So hopefully they will realize I plagiarized like mad from my shared application. How do I get this off of here? Please remove this window away from the shared application. Come on, that's never happened before.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never seen that one either.
It's like it's a new one.
Oh,
So
it's going away.
yeah, I recommend people that I think the world of. Here it comes again. What is it? It's crazy. I've never seen. Well, we'll do the best we can. We may have to be looking around corners now, but you guys you'll understand. I'm going to have this slide up at the end again when we finish. It'll be on black and white. Might be easier to read, and I'll tell you more about it along the way. But on the left are the 5 mentors that I lucked into in 1980. 2 of them are still alive. Peter's on this call, which is great. Thanks, Pete. And John Schaub. Jack Miller's passed away. Jimmy Napier's passed away, and Warren Harding. I'm going to try and share with you the things that changed my life when I was broke and going off of a cliff and going the wrong way as a water polo coach. I loved my job, but I wasn't making any money. So, and I didn't get into this for making money. So let's see if we can make this thing work. So here we go. We're going to be talking about achieving financial freedom with just $100 a month. That is $3.33 you do not waste. And people waste that every day. And then I want to talk about something that I had happen, and I'll tell you a little bit about it right now. You know, when you hear a good speaker, don't be afraid to go listen to them again. I can't believe how many times people told me, well, I went to that seminar. I don't need to go to it again. I've been to Pete's seminar, gosh, 10, 15 times. Every time I go to it, I learn things that I can use. The same thing goes for you. So I go and hear this guy, Jimmy Napier in Burbank on Sunday. Who's Jimmy Napier? And then on Monday, I heard him again in Riverside. Then I heard him again in Orange County. And by Thursday, I'm driving 80 miles to San Diego. Guy keeps talking about coming to Southern California, seeing all these $2 million cars. And I don't understand what he's talking about. I go all the way down there. I finally figured it out. I will try and share you some with that, what I learned in this talk today. Okay, here we go. I was a water polo coach. If you don't know what a water polo coach or water polo looks like, this is kind of the stuff we did. I did not play in high school, and I learned the game after I got to college. And it's amazing. I got to be able to compete with my mentors, who 2 of them were Olympic coaches. And I have a winning record against the one guy, simply because he was always off for the Olympic team with somebody else coaching his team when we happened to be scheduled against each other. So it's kind of funny, but I mean, there's no way I would have beaten Monty that many times, but it can't happen. If you will study, you will find that you can do anything you want to do in this life. Now, the chance meeting that came into my life. Now, are you people seeing the square I've got on my screen in the middle of your screen?
Yeah, but it's not bad. We'll look past it.
But it just faded away. Maybe it's gone or maybe whatever. So the chance meeting I had is I had an opportunity to go sailing on my Hobie Cat. I drove it 80 miles to San Diego. Friday night, we're at Bill's house, who was one of my youngsters of my first national championship team. We go to bed. The wind's blowing like, man, get up the next day, no wind. Billy's got these tickets to the Ruff Convention, and William Simon, the Secretary of the Treasury, was speaking. So we decided to go. We listened to the guy. I have no idea what he said. And when we get done, Billy looks out, no wind. He says, I'm in real estate. Let's go hear these real estate guys. Jimmy Napier had a heart attack. He couldn't work for a while. That's something to remember. And Jack Miller and John Schaub, on their own nickel, came out, sold Jimmy's newsletters. I sat in the room and laughed, had no idea I was going to be in real estate then. I didn't have any knowledge of real estate. And now Billy looks out, no wind. He says, I want to go talk to one of these speakers at a book thing. So I go there. Some guy tells me they never announced they were giving a seminar the 3 days that my team was given the day off during Easter vacation. And the guy talked me into paying $195 for a seminar and told me, you know, if you don't go, they'll give you your money back. Okay, so I did it. I couldn't shut him up. That's the only way I could. And then I decided to go. And the night before, I almost didn't go. So I go, and they also told me if I didn't like what I saw at lunchtime, give them their book back, they'll give you your money back. Well, Jack Miller and John Schaub are high integrity people. They would have done that. But they didn't talk about that. They talked about how to take care of your money. And they talked about a book that you haven't read yet. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a book you ought to read twice a year for the rest of your life. It will change your life immensely. So that was something that I learned. I stayed. Now that night, they put us in groups to go out, prepare to go out to meetings and see about buying houses. My group didn't do what they should. So the next morning when I come in, there's these guys with these yellow orange badges called the Academy of Real Estate. And one of them was from Costa Mesa, Art Fowler. Now I have no idea who this guy is. I walk up to him and I said, is there any chance I could join your group? My group didn't do what they should. Successful people will always reach down and help you up. And he says, yes. So now it's the evening. His daughter comes up with a motorhome. There are 10 people in the Academy of Real Estate in that group. They get in there. There's 2 other add-ons. So 13 of us get in this motorhome and we go out to 3 houses. On the way back, everybody's having so much fun. I said, if I want to learn this, what should I do? And those names I gave you out there, those 5 mentors of mine were some of the people I had to go listen to. And I went and put activity to the things that I was shared with. So that's really important. So that Hobie Cat sailing, that's what Hobie Cat is, if you don't know what it is. So let's get into the next part. I always like to talk and go back to basics. I learned that from John Wooden. You always go back to basics. The great coach at the Green Bay Packers used to come out to his professional team every year and say, gentlemen, this is a football. The team that controls the football wins the game. So you go back to fundamentals all the time. So you are a beginner. You have no money. You have no time. You're spending 110% of your income. You have no knowledge of real estate. You are in debt 1 year's income. And that was me. And today you want to be rich. Tomorrow takes a little longer, but that's where we're going. We're going to assume everybody's a beginner. We go back to square one then. Now, when you look at this screen, you see what everybody who gets into real estate is looking at. Real estate goes up. You see all the profits and all that. Well, guess what? What do you see when you see an iceberg? You see 1/9 of an iceberg, but underneath there's 8/9 of an iceberg. So you've got to recognize that there's more to do. Now, next things up is Peter Fortunato's benefit houses. He gives a class called Profits of Paper. He always does it the first weekend in December. I'm sure he's doing it again, I know, this year. And if I could fly, I would be there again. I've gone to that many times. Many of the things I'll talk about today, I learned from Pete Fortunato. You have an opportunity to learn from Pete Fortunato. You should be in that class this December. Do whatever you have to. Borrow the money if you have to and get there. I'll guarantee you, you'll make your money back. I'm going to try clicking this thing again to remove this window. Make it a, I can't get it to go away. Well, I don't see any other tricks. Okay, well, I'm going to keep working through this. Thank God I know this fairly well, I hope.
Try
All
to
right.
right click it, Jack.
It's all right. It's all right. We can see it.
Yeah, okay. Are you guys getting the box too?
We are, but
Yeah.
we can see around it. You're okay.
Okay, opportunities, there are many and they're everywhere. So here's our philosophy of what you do is the key. Now, everybody today is all they're thinking about is flip, 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 flip houses. Now, I'm a failed flipper, so I'm against it. But what's interesting, we had a group of 16 of us that used to meet every Thursday morning after I joined the Academy of Real Estate. And of those 16, the first 13 were really good. They could do all the great strategies, etc. And then there were 3 of us, and we were slow. We'd buy a property and hang on to it, learn how to manage it, and that would be it. And we'd buy another one, learn how to manage it, really slow. But you know what? When we got to the end of our lives, the people who had done the slow program were the ones with the money. The flippers were calling me. They called me at 75, 80-year-olds. What do I do now, coach? I don't have any money. So your philosophy has a lot to do with it. So here's the thing. If you can flip, flip. But may I suggest that every year you force yourself to keep one house a year. John Schaub and Jack Miller always said, if you buy one house a year for 10 years, you'll be home free. Now I'm going to say something about that again later. Okay, what I did for a living before real estate, we said I was water polo swimming coach. The main obstacles that we faced and how we overcame them. Lack of available time for real estate profits. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. No time to do anything. I only worked on real estate on Sunday afternoon after church, on Easter vacation, and the last 3 weeks of the summer vacation. Other than that, I was coaching. Lack of money for down payments. I didn't have any. Lack of knowledge of the subject of real estate. Here's how we found our financial success. Our first 15 houses purchased with none of our own capital. We had no capital. At 25 houses, our average down payment was 4.3. You should learn how to buy property with very little money. It can be done. And if you go to Pete's class, you'll learn a lot of different ways to do it. Philosophy is have someone else paying off your houses. And that really helps. When you look back at it 30, 40 years later, we've got a lot of free and clear houses. I didn't pay for them. What if you couldn't work for an extended period of time? I have a very good friend. If I gave you his name, you'd all know him. But he flipped a lot. And I wouldn't even let him speak in front of my group for 3 years because I didn't believe in flipping then. I do now because a lot of people are succeeding at it. But I wouldn't let him speak. When I finally let him speak, it's because he had sent me a book, his first book. And in the book, it had a lot of Jim Rohn type of quotes. Like if you want to be financially free, you want to study. If you want to be successful, study success. If you want to be happy, study happiness. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth. But most of all, make your life a study. So the point was, when I finally said to him, if you couldn't work for an extended period of time, where would you be? Well, you guys that are flipping all the time, put that in your mind. What would happen if you could not go to work for 1 year? Where would you be? So try to create something that you can have money coming in if you're not working. Say what? The Fullerton formula. Now, it's called the Fullerton formula. I did not name it. John Schaub was having a 20-year reunion in Florida, and he comes up to me after the first day, and he says, Coach, have you looked at the second, in the book? So I said, no. He says, well, we go over, get the book. We open it up. First day was Fullerton formula. And I said to John, what the heck is the Fullerton formula? Well, here's what happened. I was preparing to retire at 55. As a school teacher, they have A, B, C, and D. But what they don't talk about is E. So I had an appointment one-on-one with a guy at 3:30 on April 15th. I show up. He's running 20 minutes late. He comes out and he says, you can retire today. April 15th, I retired June 1st. That's 6 weeks later. I did not plan on taking a 60% pay cut. Didn't think about that. So now I'm home for about a month or so. All of a sudden I realized I'm not getting the money I used to get. What am I going to do? So then I went back and I took stuff that Jimmy taught me, which was every month that you work, you should have something that comes in for 5 years. You don't have to go back and rework. There's a check comes in. It may be $10. It might be 15. It might be 100. It might be 400. Doesn't matter what it is. Do that. So I took that position and said, I will improve my cash flow by $100 a month for the next 60 months. That's $72,000 a year. Now, here's a guy that's retiring at somewhere between 30 and 40,000, trying to make 72,000. Well, the first month I only made 83 bucks, but on the second month I made 400 and something. At 30 months, I was at 5,400. I don't know if I made 72 at the end, but I'm sure I went way beyond. But I'll tell you what, if you think about that formula, what could I do to make $100 more a month? And one of the things you could do is watch that $3.33 that you waste every day, and everybody does it. Major life changes that got in the way. Well, I was buying too fast. My wife left for greener pastures after I had 2 houses. She came back 3 years later and said, if I knew what I knew now, I would never have left. Now, that wasn't because of money, because she ran off. She wanted to play more time than I played. So my goal was 100 houses, 1 a month, much too big. And I was really trying to do that, buy 1 every month. Then one day I was at a Warren Harding seminar and I walked out to the restroom, came back. There's a guy sitting there and he says to me, young man, what's your goal? I told him I'm going to have 100 houses. He said, that's not the right goal. You don't need more than 35. And guess what his name was? Charlie Carruthers. Guess how many houses he had? 1,500. So when somebody who has 1,500 houses suggests to you that you only need 35, I don't know what you need, unless you want to be the guy that owns the Taj Mahal, lives on top of all the mountains and all that. But, you know, Mary and I didn't do that much, but we got to go everywhere in the world. We've been everywhere. We had a great life. Life changes that assisted. Well, here's one that's really big. And when you go to a seminar, some of my best friends are people I sat down next to, didn't have a clue who they were. I happened to sit down at Charlie Dorsey's seminar next to Ward Hannigan. Many of you people in Southern California know Ward Hannigan. Wonderful guy. But we didn't know each other. Neither of us had done much in real estate at that point. At least he had some knowledge of law because he'd gone to law school. So I shut down about halfway through the morning period when Charlie Dorsey says everybody in the room should be saving $1,000 a month. I'm spending 110% of what I make. I can't save 2 cents. So I kind of shut down, didn't pay attention. Then I'm going to leave at lunch. I'm not going to stay for this seminar. I'm not getting anything out of it. And Ward talked me into going to lunch with him. So we walk into the lunchroom. And as it turned out, there was a large table where Charlie Dorsey was sitting. And there were 2 empty seats and we had our name tags on. We were invited to sit. So we sat and I kept my mouth shut for a long time. Didn't say anything. I didn't want anybody to know how dumb the water polo coach was. And then eventually there was a pregnant pause. And of course, when there's a pregnant pause, somebody has to fill the air. And I said, Mr. Dorsey, you don't understand how tough my life is. I'm spending I couldn't save 1,000. And you know what he told me to do? He said, write down everything you spend for the next 30 days. Now that's something that's put out by a lot of people, but I had never heard it. So what did I do? On Monday, I started writing down everything I spent. At the end of the week, I looked at it. I was going to Charlie's Chili before my 6 o'clock morning workout, go to breakfast at 5 in the morning, would have the same foods, $6.35. I looked at that. And I said, you know, what if I went and had breakfast at 8 o'clock after workout at the captain's table here on campus? I got the same bread, the same ham, the same coffee, everything for $3.35. So for the next week, I wrote that down. Looked at it and said, well, you know what? I wonder what they charge out at the galley where you stand up. And it was $1.35. Now, the reason it was so cheap on campus is there's no cost in the real estate of the food. And the students are doing all the work because they're in classes doing this. And this is a class for them. So right there, if you think that out, I'm saving $100 a month just on breakfast. And I did it on a lot of other things. So we'll move on that. I want you to know that story. But please remember $1,000 a month, because I worked on trying to get to that $1,000 a month. It will come up later in the talk. Now, Jimmy Napier came into town one day and he told everybody, you have a choice. You can sacrifice when you're young and viable, or you can sacrifice when you're old and sick and broke. I got a lot of friends who are sacrificing now when they're old and sick because they didn't think about thinking long term. But here's what happened. I ran the Commonwealth for 30 years, and I noticed I have 2 people who spoke for me there on this call right now. And I'll never forget when they got up to speak, they didn't define it as 5 years sacrifice, but they kind of talked about that 5 years that they really sacrificed everything to get the real estate going. And it was amazing. We've had 5 or 6 people who came and spoke and said exactly that same thing. And I remember when Mick spoke, and he couldn't remember the 5th food that they ate. And Marge yelled out, pork and beans, and the place roared. So, I mean, it's really a situation if you think about it. And Jimmy also taught us that every dollar that we wasted this year that dollar was worth $212 30 years from now. Now, I used a high interest rate, but that still was something to think about. What if you knew that every dollar you waste today is going to cost you a big dollar 30 years from now? Nobody ever talks like that. I didn't learn that in school. I learned it because I went to all these classes. It was really a blessing. Now, the goal was a permanent sabbatical by 1990. Now, I started in 1980. In 1973, my college put me on sabbatical for 5 months. I could go anywhere in the world as long as I studied my subjects. So we went to Europe. We bought a Volkswagen Pop Top and we drove all over Europe and we chased the Europa Cup of water polo. We observed different swimming instruction. We observed different physical education things and ski instruction. And that's where I learned how to ski and teach skiing in Austria. So that was pretty good. So it's really interesting what your goals can be. Why are you doing what you're doing? I wanted to be free again because it was so much fun. 5 months where I didn't have to earn a nickel and my check came in. It was a great deal. That's what I wanted to try and repeat. So the next thing was, we'll talk about my first property that I purchased when I knew nothing about this. Well, it turned out that I had a teaching assistant. One day on the pool deck, she's asking me, she knew I was studying this stuff. I'd been studying for about 4 or 5 months. Hey, what would you do? You know, I got a divorce from my husband and I got $18,000 in the divorce. He was an art dealer and he's now a mortgage broker. And I lent $8,000 to Tom, Dick, and Harry. Nobody's paid me back 1 penny. And my ex is now a mortgage guy. He says he'll put the money to work for me. And I said, do you trust him? And she said, no. I said, well, whatever he offers you, I'll give you 2% more. She shows up 2 days later for the next class. And she said, well, he offered me 18. Well, my mouth made me do what I exactly had to do. I had to borrow the money, the $10,000 that she had left, and pay her 20%. Now, I tried to get her to buy a piece of real estate with that. I thought that was the best use of that money. She didn't do it, but I buy my first piece of real estate with that $10,000. It cost me $167 a month for that $10,000. Now you can borrow it with $100 a month today at 4%, you can borrow $30,000. At 3%, you can borrow more. So, you know, I may have flip-flopped that on you, but if you think about it, you can borrow a lot of money with $100 a month. And remember, $100 a month is $3.33 you don't waste. So here's the purchase of my first rental house, $100,000 house for 10% down. We bought it on 80, 10, 10. That was 10% down. Seller carried 10%. And things I learned in that 5 months, I got the seller to carry it with no payments but annual payments. And then a new loan for 80%, which I could get with my school teacher income. After the first 4 houses, my wife left. I told you that already. 2 years later, after doing nothing, I buy 3 houses in 1 day to flip because I went with a very successful person while they were going to buy REOs. I said, can I go with you when you go to buy REOs? So after she's buying the fourplexes that had been foreclosed on that she had owned on the street before, I said, well, do you have any houses? So they offered me 3 houses. Now I used my line of credit to buy these 3 houses. And I won't get into all this today. I was very naive. I was flipping these houses and I failed as a flipper. And part of the deal was I was trying to flip 1 house to make $5 grand. And I figured out after a period of time that it would take 4 months for me to lose $800 if I rented it with $200 a month negative cash flow. That house today pays me more than $2,000. I still have it. Now that's sometime back around 83, 84. 10 principles for financial success. Live on less than you earn. Cut down on your overhead. Sacrifice for 5 years. We've talked about that. Be a master of small things. That means you study a lot of little things. Study all the aspects of real estate and things. Buy and keep 1 house a year for 10 years. Manage your own real estate. Dave Tilney teaches a great class. If you've not taken that class, do take it. When I first learned that management skill from Jack Miller, after I had 4 houses, I remember coming out of that class and saying, oh my goodness, I should have learned to manage first. My first tenant was a real experience for me. My first tenant rented from me. I have a picture. I had at the time. I don't know if I have it today, but I have a picture of his driver's license. And I ran into him, and the rent doesn't come in. Around the 4th or 5th day, I go to the house and I knock on the door, and there's a bunch of illegal aliens in my house. He had sublet it out to them. Guess what that guy's name was? It was Starsky. Starsky of Starsky and Hutch name. Starsky. No, nobody knows about that. I didn't hear anybody laugh about it. But to me, I found that funny when I thought about it later. So we'll keep going on this. Okay, now we're going to go into some stuff I learned from Jimmy. And stay with me when you see these high interest rates. We're going to show you how this comes up, not as interest on money, but on interest on a yield that you make on an investment. So $100 a month at 15% for 30 years, you'd have $692,000. On the 31st year, you'd have $103,800, which means that every week you'd have $1,990 or a little bit less than $2,000. So now we'll go to the advanced class. Now I want you to see what happens when you're at higher interest rates. If you're in a higher interest rates, and we're going to kick it up just 3%, but remember at 692 is roughly 700. So remember 700. So if we did $100 a month at 18% for 30 years, we would have 1,411,000. Now that's kind of interesting that you got to be aware of. Let's see, we were doing 15%, we had roughly 7, but now when we kick it up only 3%, it doubled it. And as you go up in the number, it doubles and compounds faster. When you go down on the numbers, it compounds much slower. So on the 31st year, you have 254 or just under 5,000. Now here we are. It's time for Jimmy Napier's $2 million car. So I went to that class for 5 straight days to get this. And guess what? If you have $10,000, now how can you borrow $10,000? Well, you could pay somebody 12%, $100 a month for say 10 years. And you could then take the 10,000 and you could put it out at 18%. So let's see what happens. That's 2,127,000. So what are we learning here? An income stream at an interest rate grows at one level, but a stack of money at the beginning grows at a higher level at the end. So on the 31st year, you'd have 382,736. Now I use this a lot because there's a real thing that really helped me in my life. And so now we're going to a little different color screen on purpose. So we know that $10,000 at 18%, 30 years is 2,127,000. Remember that number now, okay? So now let's go to the next screen. At the end of 5 years, it has grown to 24,432. If you spend 5,000, the remaining money you have is 19,432. Now put that back into your financial calculator, let it grow and never touch it again for 25 years. You will now have 1,691,744. It will have cost you $435,000 by taking the money out of your growth money too soon. Now let's look at it differently. If you spend later gosh, I wish we could get this box out of here. At 25 years, it's grown to 870. Spend 5,000 now you have 865. Put that back in your calculator, go for 5 more years. It's 2,114,000 plus. So it costs of only 13,000. Can you see what happens when you start spending money early? This is what I'm trying to share with you. Money you spend early costs you a lot 30 years out. 10 principles for financial success. Well, what if you want 2 million right away and you've got $10,000? What do you have to get on that $10,000 to have 2 million? Well, $10,000, 54% makes $2 million in 10 years. Now I miss telling you the 10 years because in that darn box. So I don't know what that box is. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next thing. Now, this is going to be hard for you to see. So one of the things at the end, I'm going to give you an email address, and I'll email anybody that requests it, what is known as the Big Four. Now, I learned this from Warren Harding, and I'm lucky I joined the academy. I somehow took a risk, and it was a great risk. But I remember going to his class. He had it called The Millionaire Maker. It was a 5-day class. The guy was really great. He's the one that got Jack Miller, John Shaw, Jimmy Napier, probably Peter and others to teach. And it's really important that if you start learning something, that you teach it to other people, because guess what? You get to hear it a second time. So when you hear a good idea, share it. You get to hear it again. So basically what this does, very quickly, we're taking the rent minus the debt service, because this is all screwed up. It's hard to see. The tax and insurance, you had 136 tenable. So over here, you divide that by 50,000. I hope you guys can see down here. Maybe I can use it. Can you guys see this? The 50s here. So what you're doing is you're taking the mortgage payoff, dividing it by your down payment, which is 10% of 500,000. And you're doing, gosh, I wish I could do something else with this. Okay, and your tax benefits. And then if you get a 4% appreciation rate, you'll end up with 55.
Hey.
On this one, where we were using a 6% debt service, this is something I did back in 2007 on $500,000 houses with 50% down. So here's the deal. If you'll put 50% down, or I'm sorry, not 50%, if you put 10% or less down, and you could get a break even, you could come up with 50%. The reason I know that is I went to Cincinnati with Jimmy in 1989, 90. And I was asked to speak, and I'm speaking. I'm doing the Big Four, and I'm using $100,000 houses. And somebody, coach, so we don't have $100,000 rental houses here in Cincinnati. So we had, and Jimmy always said, you always know what you're going to talk about ahead of time. I've had that embarrassment the first time I ever spoke in front of a large group. So I said, okay, how much are your rental houses? 35,000. So we decided we'd take 10% down. We let them come up with the rent, the whole thing. And when we got done, I said, well, what do you think we could have for appreciation? And of course, they come up with 7, 8, 6. I said, well, let's just use 4. We used 4. We came up with like 52%. So what the deal is if you think about it, if you could buy houses with very little down, you're getting a high return on your down payment. And that's where you get these 50% and higher. So that's the thing. And if you want to see this in a piece of paper, send me a link to the email that's on the end, and I'll be glad to send you back a copy where you can see and really look at this. So let's see. I think we're in the thing where we should be able to do this. So let's see where we are. So knowing what is on line 24 of your tax return is really important. One of the games we try to do is to try to, try to lower the amount of taxes we paid on line 24. And what it says on line 24 is total tax. And so then turn your tax savings back into investing. Now, the one thing you want to try and think about is you want to have assets that are producing cash flow, and then you create some cash, which is now your capital for down payments, and then buy more assets. But wait a minute, you don't have any assets. So what assets do you have? The first asset you have is yourself. And yourself is an asset. And from a job, you get cash flow. You need to read The Richest Man in Babylon. It says, pay yourself first. So what you do, if you make $100 a paycheck, take $10, $5, $2, whatever. Put it in a savings account, spend what's up. Now, when I worked for Jim Rohn, he had a great philosophy statement. He said, the difference between financially free and those who are not is a philosophy. And the philosophy is those who are not financially free, they spend their money first and save if there's anything left. Financially free people save their money first and spend what's left. So it's really amazing. If you'll think about everything being this triangle, just keep the triangle going. Now, when I talked with Rich earlier, where are you now? You want a financial statement You do it for yourself. If you don't know what it is, get a loan application and fill out a financial statement. And then I share with people, keep a folder that says financial statement. Once you become financially free, it's fun to go back and see how bad off you were when you started. Where are you going? Well, you need to write some goals. And a lot of other people talk about goals. We're not going to do about, but write down what you want to do. One of the things I learned when I worked with Jim Rohn, I'm 43 years old, and I had goals. They were always in my head. But he taught me that if you'll write them down and reevaluate and rewrite them constantly, they'll do better. Because when you write them down, it's amazing, they pull. Now, I have some journals. I go back and look at stuff I wrote in the 80s through 85, and it's fascinating. I wrote things down I never thought I'd ever do. Man, the day that we went into different places in Europe, I'm going, wow, that's amazing. So it's interesting. Line of credit discipline. There's a property I won't talk about at this meeting. I talk about a lot. But the reason I got this really great property once is because a lot of people in the academy and other friends I knew had an opportunity at it way before I did. And I bought that property because none of them could get to the cash, 23,000 in those days, to do the deal. And I found out about it on Tuesday. We even negotiated with one of the people who had a note on it at 2 o'clock in the morning in New Mexico. Through a translator, and we closed on the deal at 4:30 on Thursday. I still have that property. And at the time, we structured it in a way to break even. And I'm going to tell you, that thing is free and clear today. It kicks off a lot because it's 8 single family houses on a lot. So it turned out to be great. But line of credit discipline means get a line of credit. Go get one, get whatever you can somewhere. The minute you get it, I want you to take $2,000 out. Put it in a savings account. I want you to every month, 3 to 5 days early, pay a little bit on that that's required, a little bit. When you get down to $500, take it back out again so that it's there the day you need 35, 50,000 on a deal that's right in front of you. You can go get it with that money. And we did that many, many times to buy property. Those 3 properties I bought in one day was my line of credit money. So you got to realize, and Jimmy taught us never to pay off the line of credit to zero because you got to go, get a new one. So don't ever pay it off. Just keep using it. Activity plan, have an activity plan. Mary's and my activity plan was went to church every Sunday. And on a Sunday afternoon, we went, found every open house we could. We just walked through the houses, looked at it, started finding it. What it taught us is, in our farm area close to home, and we learned another thing from Jim Rohn: don't go across town until you go across the street. So 2 of my best deals are within 8 houses where I lived. And what happens is you then know what the market is. Now, one of the houses I'm going to talk about in a minute, I'll explain that a little further. And lastly, a scorecard, a new financial statement. And if you make a file cabinet, in your file cabinet, put a file in it and save them all, it's fun to go back and look at them years later. Now we're done with this, and Rich and I agreed if there's any questions on the first part, this is a good time to ask them. And then we'll get into structuring a few deals.
Yeah, go ahead and blurt them out, guys. There's none in the chat. So if anybody has a question, feel free. Or a comment. I think it's great so far.
Can you explain again the line of credit? So you said take out 2,000 and then pay it off, I guess, monthly, I guess at a certain amount, and then till you get down to 500, then redo it again.
Okay.
Can you explain all that?
Let's say they give you what they did for me. I got a $30,000 line of credit to start with. Now it's gotten much bigger since, but what happened is I had that 30,000 and I got it a little bit bigger the day I needed the 23,000 to do that one deal. But what happens is you take the money out when you first get it, like you're going to use it, and don't use it for lifestyle. Use it only for your investments. And then what happens, once you say, I suggest you put $2,000 in savings. Yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit of costs but that little cost when you make big bucks is going to be worth it. So what you do is, let's say that the minimum payment for the line of credit on the next payment is $20, pay $20, pay it early. Do that every month. When you get down to about 500 of that money being in savings, pull some more out, but keep doing that so that the day that you need the money, you have that checkbook, you can write that check that day. And that's what made it so that I could do, gosh, a bunch of properties. Lines of credit saved me a lot of money, made a lot of money because of my line of credit before I ended up having my own money when you don't have any. So any other questions, Rich, that we should talk about?
Not that I see, but could you go into like the 5 years of sacrifice a little bit more? Like, is that just eating ramen? Is that, driving a beater instead of like, what does that look like for somebody nowadays?
Well, yeah, it could be, one thing I didn't tell you about, when I drove all the way to San Diego to find out about the $2 million car, guess what I just bought 2 weeks before? A $10,000 Mercedes Champagne diesel. And now I find out I'm driving a $2 million car. So I eventually went from there to a Camry. But it's really interesting. The sacrifice thing is up to each person. You got to figure out how you can do it. How do you cut back? I mean, some of my friends, they cut back by the type of food they ate, by all kinds of things. You just don't spend. Mary and I had our date night when it was 2 for $1 at Bob's Big Boy, where you get a salad and a big boy and a fries. And that was our date night every Tuesday night. I'll never forget that. And that was our pure date night. But that we were eating our food and we're eating cheaper by getting 2 for $1. So it was, those are the kinds of things you just have to, every time you start to spend $1, do I need this today? Or would it be better to let it go into an asset that'll eventually give me more than I'll ever need? You remember, I think we did, or maybe it's later, the 10 maxims of wealth. It says, wealth is not a pile of it's not a pile of, what does it say? Wealth is not a pile of, it's an income stream that forever gives you more than you need. That's what you're striving for. Let's go through some houses now, okay? Let me take a sip first. Now, isn't that interesting? Here comes Pete's house again. Now, the reason you look at this enough and pay attention to it is because for every house deal, there's growth, profits, income management, amortization, tax benefits, and use. And different people need different parts of it. So it's really interesting, and you could give different parts out to different people for different reasons. Now, because sometimes I talk to people in areas when they have $900,000 value houses. I'm going to talk about one in a minute. There's now over $1 million, but there's a $905,000 house, 3 houses away that we bought for family needs. So why did we buy that? Well, for family needs, and thank God at the end of our time, we have the capital to be able to buy that. We were trying to change the house next to the mother of my children on a house that she and I bought so many years ago. But the stairs in those days were very steep. And one day I was coming down the stairs and I almost fell down the stairs, and she's got Alzheimer's and she's got stage 9, and she would sleep upstairs and I could just see her falling down and killing herself. So we tried to buy the house next door. And we finally, after a year of negotiating, we finally got it. We paid $905 for it. We started at $800, but we're at $905. But we didn't care about price. What were we buying it for? Family need. So we got that. Today, my caregiver lives in that house, which is 2 houses from me. About 35 years ago, the mother of my children got Mary and I to move up to this house so we could be closer to my youngsters when they were growing up. So here's the second one. And I think it's closing this week. The offer here was $900,000, and they didn't close on it real quick because the sellers wanted them to to allow them to live in the house for 6 weeks at a cost that would have been $2,500 a month rent, but that's $1,200 they were giving away on the rent. And they were sitting there not wanting to do that And I suggested they do that, but during the period of time, unfortunately, there were 4 other people offering on this house. And after supposedly they thought they had it the first time, as I understand, it was put back out to all the other buyers who then negotiated it again. So now these people did get it and they really like this. They've been trying to find a house for 9 months and they can walk to it within 5 minutes. So this is a house close to home. And they ended up getting it, and they had to have a 12-month rent shortage. Was originally for 6 months and now going to be 2 months of free rent and then 4 months with this 1,200 short. So now they're buying it for $915 plus that loss of about 4,800, which puts it at about $920. So sometimes when you've got a deal, don't try to get it so perfect that you don't close your fist. Close your fist. Now, the reason I bring up this other one, this is another high-end house. This one we bought for the 700 range, and it was found by one of our tenants. Now, my tenants are out looking all the time. They know that if I buy a house they lead me to, I will give them something in return. They don't know that I give them back 2 months free rent, and I give them 2 months rent. So it's, if they're renting for $3,000, that's $6,000 I give away. But if I get a house that I think is a good deal, I'm going to do that. And I've done it a couple of times. And it's fascinating. Well, I have one house and we bought 3 houses from my tenant because they told me about it. And it was a 238,000 market then. I bought it for 170. And the reason is because I bought the previous one for 170, which was given to me by a guy who bought it at foreclosure for 162. I said, why would I pay 230? I bought that house over there for 170. And here's the thing that you can find out in my next, one of my next things. A lot of times parents buy a house for their kids to live in. That works great until the kid decides to leave. Then the parents don't want the house. So we bought a number of houses where the daughters have moved out and we now buy that rental. That property that they lived in. So let's go to now. I start with this. I want to share with you a few things. When you don't know what you're doing, and I didn't when I did this. This is 1985. This is the deal I'm going to talk about, but that's the contract. Now, here's what went on that one. I'm going to try and get to the next part. Well, basically what went on that, I'm walking into the bank. I bump into a guy I know. He's a realtor and a CPA. And he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm buying houses. He said, oh, I'm selling my house. I said, where? Wake Forest. And I said, well, how much you want for it? 110. And I said, well, I'd be interested. He said, well, I think I have it sold. That's Friday. Well, here's what goes on. Your integrity always walks in front of you. Take care of your integrity. So here we are, purchase the Wake Forest house. Method of purchase, small down, subject to seller financing. Remember, I was told I had to learn how to save $1,000 a month. That's going to come up in a minute. Opportunity, TTP, which is talk to people. I'm buying houses. Market value, 125. Well, Mary and I knew that because we drove around and saw houses like this. And we're buying it for 110. The guy calls me up on Sunday and said, hey, meet me at Denny's. I think I'd rather sell this house to you because I know you'll pay me. I'm not sure the other guy will. So we get there, the rent's $1,050. Now, Pete teaches a great class called One Step Beyond. And this is a one step beyond where I learned it from him on that. So here we are, purchase percentage 88. Down payment was $4,000. That was all I had in savings. Subject to a $93,000, 13% loan and a seller's loan, $13,000, 0 interest, $1,000 a month. And here's why. They're solving the seller's needs. He wanted the $4,000 to be able to go to North Carolina to see relatives. Then when he came back, he wanted to know that he had $1,000 a month coming in for that 13 months. There's another thing. The reason he was selling the house, he had rented out 3 rooms in this 4-bedroom house, and they were all druggies. When I went and checked with the police department, is there any problems on Wake Forest? He said, oh yeah, that house on the one I was buying, they have a lot of drug problems there. Well, by him selling the house, the drug people had to leave. So that solved that street. The street was fine then. So that was something that was interesting. And negative cash flow of 1,096. You never want to do negative cash flow unless you have a job like I had, where I had learned from my discipline to save 1,000 a month. Well, I could then take on 1,096 negative. Now, I would suggest you do that, but you can always do things that you can perform on. And so, teachers are hard to get rid of when you have tenure. So, I had a pretty solid job, so I could afford to do that. But now watch what happens later and why I did it. There was my reasons for doing it. It was a one step beyond transaction. So here we go. You'll see I use one step beyond a lot. So the down payment's $4,000, subject to a $93,000 loan. You can take subject to any property today. If you'll read the clause, which went from, I think, clause 18 to 19 or 17 to 18, if you'll read that clause, it says the lender may call, not will call. And if you're a pretty good person, you'll be surprised how easy it is to take subject to. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that they're not going to come after you. So just be aware, but you got to, remember that it can be risky. Seller loan of $13,000, $1,000 a month. And what's going to happen 13 months from now? Well, that'll go away. So I'm paying $1,096 to get this property. So instead of me sending $1,000 every month to the savings account, I'm sending it off to this property. Am I getting a better return than I would in the savings account? Heck yeah. So now here we go. 2 years later, what did I do? Market value now is $140,000. And I get a new first of $810, eight three quarters. And there's your payments, your taxes and insurance. The new rent is $1,150. So new position, positive cash flow, $120 a month. That's pretty good for me in the beginning. So that's what we did. Now let's look at 2007 situation. That's 32 years later. The house is worth $650. The financing and monthly remaining balance is $67,000. And now it's, with all the insurance and everything, is $1,077 with a rent of $2,100. And I've got the same tenant in there since 1990. Now here's the classic part. Let's see what's next. Positive cash flow of $1,000 a month. But here's what's really interesting. That thing's up to close to $3,000 now. That house now shows up at over $1 million. That tenant in that house calls me up one day and says, I want to show you something in the garage. We go in the garage. This guy has this big, what do they call it? It's like countertop stuff they use where they make it out of resins and things. Beautiful. He says, my wife doesn't like having the countertop so high. She'd like me to lower it. Can I put this countertop in and lower it? So he's redone the whole kitchen, and it's great what he did. And it's with a composite, a really wonderful looking composite countertop, which is lower the way his wife wanted it. So now he's got it, and they've been there since 1990. Not bad. Okay, let's go. Where do we go next? Don't go across town until you go across the street. Your integrity is important. General Eisenhower, string on the table. In the Second World War, he was over a lot of generals. He had him in front of him one day, and he had the big conference table. And he laid out a big string, and he took one end and he pushed it toward the other end. He said, gentlemen, this is not how you lead. You lead by taking the string and you wiggle it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So what you want to learn to do is lead the other side to where you're going. And you don't want to push at them. You push at them and they'll just back off. You've got to get them to get you to buy their house. Now, here's what you got to think about. How do you change the whole program? Well, most people say offer a price, pay so much, and that's it. Most realtors, that's all they know. Realtors are great, but many of them have never been trained like we were back in the 70s and 80s. And so here's the deal. What you've got to do is try to get face to face with your seller and then get the seller to tell you where they're going and why they're going. And then I want you to realize the following. You are there with your knowledge, your expertise, your commitment to doing things, what you can do, and all your skills, and they've got something to buy all those with. And what is that? That is their house. So you want them to tell you how you can buy that. And what I do is I have somebody tell me what they're gonna, how to buy it. And I say, you know what, Mr. Jones, there's no way I could do that. I would not want to disappoint you, so I can't do that. And then I say, you got any other ideas? And I shut up and don't say a word. And you know what? If they really want to sell that house, they've got 5 or 6 different ideas of how they're going to sell it. Or you want me to go get a new one? Well, I just can't do that today. You got any other ideas? Shut up again. And I'm going to tell you, if I went into some of my other deals, I got some crazy deals and I did not create them. It was all by my sellers. So keep that in mind. You want to get them to buy you to buy their house using their house as what they're buying you from. The contract on Wake, we showed that. I'm going to show you a contract on Falstaff. Now we only put 3 letters on. We work in 3 letters in our database, so that's why they're there. But Falstaff is something I bought up in Gardnerville. We were buying a bunch of houses in Gardnerville with the idea that Mary and I would move up near her family. And if anything happened to me, Mary would have a number of houses up there. But the deal on this is we go out with her sister and her husband, and they got us looking at this house and that house. And every time we came out of a house, I'm talking to the people that are out jogging or whatever, asking them if they know anybody that would like to sell a house. We go around to the next street and there's a little 4-wheeler and they use them a lot up there. And there's people there and they're just coming out of the house. I said, do you know anybody that would like to sell a house? Oh yeah, the people here are thinking about moving back to Ventura. They'd like to sell their house. May I talk to them? So we talked to them. When we got done, we came up with an agreement. Now, here's the rule that I've got now. When you're discussing what's going on with somebody else, and if you're kind of coming up with the ideas, their head's going up and down, they understand. No, they don't understand. The smartest thing you could do is get the one with the least knowledge to write the contract to the one with the most knowledge. So what we did, we had to go home. So we said, how about you guys type it up what we agreed and we'll do the deal. So we get home, we get this type thing, and here it is. This is their type deal. So there was something wrong on this. This is probably the corrected one, I'm not sure. But what we did is we went to that and we called them on the phone and said, hey, could we go over number 6? We talked about number 6 and we both got on the same page. I said, how about you guys writing that? And they write it in their wording, not our lingo, their wording. And then you figure out do you understand what they're talking about? And once you have that, we went to escrow, we closed on that house. It's been a great house. It's a beautiful house inside, etc. That now belongs to Mary's sister. Mary's passed away. So all the houses we had in Gardnerville, we made sure that they belonged to their sister. And guess what? They live within 3 to 5 miles of all these houses. And I live within 3 to 5 miles of all my houses. So that's a good thing. It's a lot easier when you're managing your own. Okay, here's another one. Now, don't go across town. Integrity, we talked about Eisenhower, Wake, Fall. Money on the dining room table. This is one of Pete's things. This is brilliant, in my opinion. You just decided you're going to buy this house. They're going to end up with all cash, and they're going to have, say, $700,000. And you just say, well, gosh darn, if I come in here with $700,000 in $100 bills, and we put them on the dining room table, and then I go away, and I'm going to come back in 3 weeks, will they still be on the dining room table? Then shut up, and guess what? They'll say, oh, no. Well, where'd they go? Oh, they went here, they went there. And then what you try to do is get them to come up with some of the ideas you might throw out, not push, just kind of mention, and let them say, hey, that would be better. Oh, gosh darn it. If I put $500,000 in the bank and I'm getting less than 1%, you mean if I lent that to you at 3%, I'd get that kind of money? you know, and bingo, now you got a 500,000 seller carryback or whatever, you know, so that's why you think about using that. And Pete taught that to me. I can't take credit for it, but it works great. It's really a good one. So here we go. Now, I didn't know what I was doing when I did this, but let me show you why I share this, because you can go do this right now. Pete and I were talking about trying to help one of my doctor friends. And one of the things we were talking about doing is I would buy his $2 million property and I'd buy it putting notes on all my other properties. Now, when I got done, I wouldn't have any debt on his property. And then I'd turn around and sell his property when I could for all cash. What would I do at that point? I just developed a great deal of cash. We ended up not doing that, but I was helping my doctor, who's my cardiologist, try and take care of his real estate needs. I'm always helping people that I can whenever I can. So here we go. Now pay attention. This ended up being no debt on the property. So watch what happened. The method of purchase was $100. Seller carries all the financing to match her needs. To match her needs. Opportunity service, once again, TTP, I'm talking to people, I'm buying houses. Market value, 90,000. Now remember, these are smaller things, but I want you to think about the strategy and think about it, because you could use this, you could do this on $1 million property right now if you knew how to do it. Purchase price ended up being, I didn't set the price, it ended up being that. The rent was $800. The purchase was 79%. The financing was $100 today. I bought 3 properties with a $100 bill. Jack Fullerton taught us to always carry a $100 bill. Always have a $100 bill that you never spend in your pocket. Seller's loan of $5,000. I think it's 8 months later they needed $5,000. The seller had loan of $35,500 was what she had on her personal risk. Remember I said something about a daughter. Daughter was living in this condo. Daughter moved out. She didn't want the condo. And her payment was $313.99. And the seller loan of $30,914 with quarterly payments of $1,154. Don't be afraid to do quarterly. So here's what the real deal is. $100 down payment. One-time payment of $5,000 8 months later. $35,500 note matches her personal house debt, was secured by other property. Now, I love to talk about this one because this is really a good deal. It was a good deal for her. It's a great deal for me. The $30,914 other note is 34 quarterly payments to match her health and life insurance payments secured by other property. I sold the property for all cash 4 years later and bought discounted notes. I found I didn't want to be in the discounted note business. For some of you, it's great. For me, it was not. What was great for Mary and I, we managed our own real estate, and we felt we could schedule to leave our area on the 5th of the month and scheduled to be back on the 25th. So we really only were around to work on property for 10 days of every month, because we'd be somewhere else in the world or doing something. You can go away for 3 weeks and do a lot. There is no debt on the property when it was sold. So let's see what happens. Okay, above these 3 notes, I said there are other properties that had cash flow. The insurance match note went for 8.5 years. This is the best part of it. The seller moved 3 times with no forwarding address. Checks start coming back. So we worked hard to try and find the person. She had moved to Fresno. We found her and sent her all the checks. And then the next thing that happened again, they start coming back. So now I got to find her again. I think it took 3 or 4 months again. Finally get her on the phone in Oklahoma. And I get her on the phone and she says, "Oh, I'm so glad I lent those things with you. You work so hard to make sure I get paid." Man, is that a rewarding statement? I'll never forget that. So we did that. So the seller passed away down the line. The note was modified to 2 notes, separate notes for 2 heirs. One discounted, the other paid off in 22 years. The one who discounted wanted some money because they were moving from this area to Oklahoma and they needed money to be able to move. And so they came up with an amount that I could pay now to get that half a note taken away. So that worked out pretty good. This turned out to be a very good deal. When I did this, I did not do it with the intent of having it free and clear with the idea I'd get the cash. I now do it with intent, with the idea I'm trying to create cash by doing those kinds of things when I want to create cash. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to do, and this one is really good. This was done. This is 8 houses from where I lived, and the guy that lived in it happened to be my office mate at the college. Neither one of us knew each other when we bought our houses. Just so happened we're 8 houses apart. Now, this guy is a coach, and he was a great coach. And one of the things about him is that there was no gray in his way of living. It was either black or it's white. So listen to how this works. This property was listed at 214 in a $220,000 mark. 6 weeks earlier, they had turned down a very good all cash 185 price. It had been a rental, and they came to me. I said, well, offer it to your tenant. They had offered it to their tenant, and the tenant moved out. They did not spend any money to remove the bad wallpaper. They had purchased their new personal residence 20 months before. They now have a house on the bluff to retire in here in the Corona del Mar, Newport Beach area. They had a large taxable event. Now this is important because this was a lot of the motivation. They had a large taxable event, if not sold within the next few months, Internal Revenue Code 1034. That was then. Then that was replaced with Internal Revenue Code 121. You need to study taxes and be aware of different taxable, because in transactions, sometimes that could be, we almost bought a house on the next block that's worth way over $1 million today. And the motivation there was they had the 1034 of the Internal Revenue Code 121 going on. All right, here we go. Method of purchase was a 4-note stack from a friend. Potential large taxable event looming. Now, I did not want to buy it. I did everything in my power not to buy this property. The friend knows I buy houses. He kept bugging the heck out of me. You have to buy the house. Nobody's buying the house. I want to get this house sold now. We're just before we're going to start school. He had a couple of motivations. Number one, he wanted to be free of the house. He was eating up all his savings. So if he didn't get it sold, he didn't have the money to pay the taxes that he would have to pay because he just used it on an empty house for 4 or 5 months. He also wanted to win the national title as a soccer coach. This is a guy who's a great baseball player. So soccer was something he had to learn, and he became a very fine coach in that. So, and they did win the national title. So the next thing, the market value is 220. The purchase price turned out to be 172. Gosh, that's crazy. He turned down 185. Things changed in that 3 to 4 months when he started seeing what was going to happen and how the house was really getting to be a time problem for him. Why, I don't know, but he's a good friend. I think the world of him. I did not want to, I'd rather have a friend than buy a house. But I did buy the house finally. He twisted my arm enough. The rent was $11.55, so there's a negative cash flow of $622. Once again, you go, oh my God, here he goes again, negative cash flow. It's got a big story that's important. The down payment was all I had, $4,000. The first was $38,000 at 7.5%. The reason that was there is when it was purchased. The second was $60,000, third of $50,000. The total was $1,777. Taxes and insurance was $75,000. And the seller's fourth had no payments for a year. I learned that from my mentors, 10%. So now let's talk about this a little more. New financing 9 months later. So let's look at what I really did. Original down payment was $4,000. But on my first month's rent, I got $1,155 and I got $2,200. So that's $335. Actual down payment was $645. Monthly negative for 9 months of $622 plus it. So my cost to purchase this house was $6,200. The rent was with negative cash flow again. Now, new financing monthly, a first of 180 at 8 3/4, and we had taxes, insurance, etc. We also had rent included a lease option payment of 300 toward the purchase of the home. So our negative cash flow dropped down to 36. Now let's talk about what this house did. Notice, oh, I don't say it here. Sales price was 365. Sales proceed was 305 cash, 60,000 for a down payment, and I carried a note for 60,000. All right, now, all right, hang on, I got to back up. Somehow I must have taken something out. The reason I like this deal so much, and I got to tell it to you a little differently. I must have missed something here. Well, golly darn. Basically, what made me buy this house is, it's not in there. I must have taken it out somehow by accident. All right, let's get this back where we can see all the things. Notice here, we got a $4,000 down payment, a first of 38, a 60,000, a 50,000, and 50. So now I want you to look at these things right here. First of all, this was his acquisition of the property originally. This second for 60,000. Now here's what he basically told me, and I never heard this before. And he said, Jack, you have to understand, this house did its job. Wow. How did it do its job? Well, the 60,000 here sent 2 of his youngsters to school, to college. The 50,000 was the down payment to buy the house in Corona Del Mar. The 20,000 was going to send the 3rd child to college. But here's the other thing he said. His wife could be in the kitchen looking out the window into the swimming pool. As the kids grew up, they learned how to play in the pool, and she could watch them all the time. When they got old enough and they could swim well enough, they could get on their bicycles and ride 1.5 blocks away, get on the river trail. The river trail led all the way to Newport Beach. They could go to the beach. So it did so many things for that family. And I don't think we think about what the house does for a family that lives in it. But that's what this one did. And so when he said the house did its job, that kind of weakened me a little bit when he explained that all to me. And I think that's something that's really worthwhile. That's why I like to show that one. And what's great is I made a big profit on it. Oh, and he also said the following. This is one of the other things that allowed me to sell it. And I mean, to take it and do it, is he said, Jack, I don't care. Now remember, we're in a 220,000 market. I don't care if you make $1 million on this property. And that's exactly how I know that that was a true statement from him. He didn't care how much I made on it. It let him be free to be coaching correctly. It got rid of his taxable event. The whole thing worked out great. So the dream machine, I learned the financial calculator, and I use it for a dream machine. I said, well, what if I could put $100 a month at 15% for X period of time? What if I borrowed $10,000 a day? What if I did this? What if I did? So that to me is a dream machine. So the financial calculator. There are 2 people on this call right now that teach financial calculator right now. Andy Teasley and Bill Tan. And if you haven't taken their class, do take it. I used to teach this. I don't teach it anymore, but it's really important. Learn how to use it and use it every day for about 5 minutes. Just dream with it. I call it the dream machine. Learn how to use it daily. Game plans, chart your progress, revise your goals, and set a new activity plan. And lastly, a scorecard, a new financial thing. So, here we go. 10 maxims for wealth. I didn't have time to put them all on here, but here it is. Wealth is not a pile of assets, but rather an income stream which continuously provides more than enough to satisfy your desire. The principal should never be spent, only return on the principal. Maintain your seed corn at all costs and constantly review the 10 maxims of wealth. This is one that if you send something to me, I'll send it to you, where it gives you all 10 of them. They came out of the Richest Man in Babylon by Jack and John. Now, Jim Rohn says the key to your better future And I think some of you have heard of Jim Rohn. If you haven't, go find it. Bruce Norris and I both were in a class in August of 1981 called The Challenge to Succeed. You can find that on the internet. And I would get the 1981 version. It is great. I have it on a little recorder. Sometimes at night, I'm listening to it again and again. I worked with the man, so I heard it firsthand twice a month for 5 years. And I still listen to it. There's so many simple little things in there. But he says the key to your better future is you. You are the future. You're the key. So go out and do it. The elf philosophy we all believe in is it's easy, it's lucrative, and fun. And why not you traveling to Europe, Far East, Australia, New Zealand, South America, cruising on the Danube, Budapest, Vienna, cruising the Greek islands, Rhodes, Mykonos, and Santorini, and cruising to Scotland and Ireland and things like that. So here we are. Can you climb to the top of the mountain? Can do. Yes, you can if you think you can. If you think you can't, guaranteed you're right. Don't be a think I can't, be a I can do. Can do is really important. That was a sign we had on the pool deck at the college. My athletes will show up and they say they learn more from the can do sign by believing that they could. So that's the end. And I'm going to lay this up for a moment here. This is the cash flow depot. All the people I recommend, Bill Tan's on the call, Bill Cook's here, Andy's here. Some of these other people, Gordon Moss was on a talk I gave recently. Gary Johnston is giving the Legends of Real Estate or something like that in Vegas. You ought to go to that. Dyke Spotiffer is brilliant. Dave Tilney, when he teaches management, you should be in the class. But most of all, I would get that Cash Flow Depot. And if you get on Cash Flow Depot, there are two things I would share with you that you might want to get. I was in the class for $500. Now, Cash Flow Depot costs $299 right now for your life. And I was in a class that Jack Miller gave called the 12-Step Road to Riches. And I'm going to tell you, I've listened to it 10 times on the recording this year alone. And I keep hearing stuff I don't believe I didn't hear that. And it's really valuable when you get to listen to this people like that over and over. And he has another one called Foundations of Wealth. And like I said to Rich, and I'll say it right now, he opens Foundations of Wealth and he says, real estate is a con game. He says it's a confidence game you play on yourself. So there's also another class he taught that had to do with the fear factor. And running the Commonwealth for all those years, we had so many people would come through, they'd learn it and do so, but they'd never do anything with it. You have to put activity to it. So I think that's enough. Hopefully you wrote all those things down. If you want to have the 3 handouts I would share with you, which is the big 4, the 10 maxims for real estate and the 10 principles, send it to Commonwealth OC Gmail, say, please send handouts. I'll send them back to you. Rich, I think that's enough. I've talked a long time, longer because of our little square.
I could listen to you all night.
Yeah.
Sure you don't want to
Thank
keep
you
going?
very much. Huh?
You sure you don't want to keep going? I could listen to you all night.
Well, if anybody's got questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them one by one as we can. In the meantime, while people are typing them in, my question, I'm sure some other people are wondering this too. Especially for us in Southern California, a lot of these deals that were done more than a few years ago, the numbers look kind of, small to what they are now. Does that change at all? How does that change today, if it does at all?
I don't think it changed. And I'll tell you why. I bought property in other areas where our numbers were high back then, like at 300, and they're down in the 100 or even lower. And you could do the same thing, lower amounts, you can do it higher amounts. See, here's the key. If you let's say I want to buy $1 million property today. Okay. But you know what? How does rent going to cover $1 million property? Well, what if you could get the seller to put a lot of it on the sidelines and get it paid sometime in the future. And you don't have to pay for it now. You just maybe took $1 million property and broke it down to a 400,000. And now you're paying so much on that, that you could put 4 or 5 different loans on it behind, say, a 400, let's say you went out and got a $400,000 loan against it. And what if you took, because you had other property, you took the other 600,000 and had it recorded on other property that you own? Could you do that? Yes. Would that property break even? If the notes you put on other property, you agreed with the seller, you'd move it to this property in the next year, but there's no payments on it today. The interest could be accruing for a little time, or there's no interest until I pay off the first one. Then the interest starts on the second one. Then the interest starts on the third one. I pay it off. And you have things sitting out there with no interest and no payments for a period of time. Now you can do that. It's been done many times. I've learned that from my mentors. I've done it a few times. You just have to find the right person. What you got to realize is somebody today out there right now, tonight, has to leave your area. And if you're in front of that person that day, that night, you'll be surprised. Let's give an example. The guy's got $3,000 a month going out right now, and he can't get the house sold. But he'll double his income if he's in Chicago next week. And if he doesn't get there by next week, then he doesn't get that deal. So he wants to be in Chicago, double his income, but he doesn't need the shelter he's paying for in California. But he also needs shelter in Chicago. So if you could take over his position here, he may not care about getting his equity right away. What he needs is get rid of that cash flow, because cash flow is what we all live on. Not many people have a lot of money in the bank. I mean, you stop and think about it, there's not a lot of money in the bank. People don't put money in the bank, they spend it every month. And if you run into somebody like that and you could take over their payment and then, give them their money sometime in the future, bingo, you can buy $1 million house that way, because you've solved their needs of what they're trying to do. That's with the property I just did, where the guy wanted to be the national champion. Stop and think about it. What did I do? I solved his needs, didn't I? Yeah, he created the offer. I didn't create the price. He created the price. We were solving his needs. And I didn't want to buy that property. That's another thing. You can try to back away from a person if they really want to sell. They'll figure out how to get you to buy it. And they'll do it so that they can get where they're going somewhere else. And you only take it on if you know you can perform. And I did that many times. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah. It sounds like obviously the principles stay the same. It's just the numbers change. So.
We're gonna
Anybody
stop.
else?
I don't know, those prices seem mighty high to me.
What? What's really high?
$950,000 house.
No, it's not.
It's for me. I haven't bought one of those this year.
I bought one that's 2 houses, 3 houses away. It's not that big a deal.
Oh, wow.
There was a time when what's really, Andy, what's really funny? I remember in front of my Commonwealth when our market was like 230, 250. And I said, hey guys, I think we're going to be laughing when we get to our $500,000 rental properties. Well, guess what? We've got $1 million rental properties now. We didn't buy them all for that price. We bought a lot of them now for 100,000. But some of them we bought at 300, some of them we bought at 500, some of them we bought at 700. We just buying it whatever, and that's my market in my town. So I buy in my own town. If I put you in my car and drove you around for 45 minutes, we would only go, one house would only be 3.1 miles away. The rest are 2.3 miles, and we will have gone by 17 tenants. Now I have some more outside, as many of you know, but I mean, that's my nucleus. And anybody can do that.
Yeah, I like close houses, but I was really teasing you, Jack, because the mobile home world is a lot more affordable.
Well, tell me about it. If I were in your neighborhood, I'd be buying it just like you do. And I think you people that are out that way should go to Andy's and listen to Andy. He's got it figured out.
Well, I'm not starving.
Hey, Coach, it's Alvin.
Alvin who?
Alvin Baker.
Hello, Alvin Baker. How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Better and better. Thank you.
I just wanted to let you know that I did laugh at your Starsky reference there, that it didn't go, unfulfilled. I actually had a Starsky and Hutch action figure in car, believe it or not. So, but I'm probably one of the few people here on this call that was born in the 70s. So, with the exception of your friends like, Andy and Bill and whatnot. So,
What's funny,
I'm
I don't
born
not
in
to,
the
not to
70s.
throw anybody under the bus there. So,
His name was Paul Glazer or Paul Glasser.
yeah, Paul Glasser. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I didn't get whether that was real. Was it really him, Coach, or was it just
Oh,
somebody
no,
with the
no,
name?
no. It was somebody else. The
Oh.
guy was an attorney and a police officer. And it was at a time when we didn't know about Starsky and Hutch. I mean, it just popped up after the fact, and I'm going, because if a guy's giving me a thing that says Starsky on it, I would have said, no, wait a minute. No, this was at a time, this is back in 80. I don't think Starsky and Hutch was around, or I had never heard of it at that point. But it was a fascinating thing. What was really neat is they were more afraid of me and they moved out. And my next tenant, thank God, had a house sold out from underneath him. And if that guy ever showed up, I would probably give him $10,000 right now for him moving in for about 6-7 years when I was a beginner. And I normally have his name in my head, but I can't get it to come out. Finding I'm not able to bring names and words out sometimes now.
The CRS, Jack, it's going to get us all.
All righty. Anybody else have another question? We're going to stick around. I think Andy's going to host the after hours here, but I think that's going to do it for the official part of the meeting.
Well, how about Coach? Coach,
Well, he's going to stick around.
Bill, what do you want? Bill, what do you need?
$1 million or $1 doubling every day for 30 days?
Take $1 doubling every day for
Oh,
30
you're
days.
supposed to ask them, not me.
Oh, well, you threw it out. I don't know. What are you trying to get to?
How much is,
I thought it was a penny.
okay, do a penny. I think it's a
Fast.
penny. I think you're right.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna argue with you. of all
Well,
Works
I'm
either
not
way,
gonna
it's a hell
argue.
of a lot of money.
yeah. It turns out you want to do that, but no, I never thought we'd ever be talking. I mean, I just can't believe we're talking about $1 million rental properties. My friend bought one for 920 and this week, I believe. I just find it. I mean, the only reason we bought for 905 is because we had the need, and had we realized that my son was going to brilliantly realize we could give up the dining room, he could make a bedroom for his mom, because she never moved into that house we bought next door. It was a 1-story. But today I've got my caregiver. And when I went crashing down and I was all by myself in the house, I got her on the phone and she and her husband came over and picked me up. So having her 2 or 3 houses away is a benefit. So it's, you never know what's going to happen. And if you do this business and you make some money, and when you get to a point where you need some medical help, you can afford to pay for it. That's a heck of a lot better than a poor person who doesn't have the money to pay for what their needs are. Because I'm going to tell you, if you go into some of these homes, and the people that take care of you in there are not as good as people that you pay for, who care for you and you care for them. And it's fascinating. You're so much better. So this is really worth learning how to do it, and always make sure you take care of the other guy. Take care of the other guy first, make your profit later. Don't make profit on top and hurt other people. Always take care of that other guy.
Hey, Coach, on some of those examples you gave us, you showed how you were out of pocket for some amount of time on getting into the deals, but then obviously you made your profit as time went on. You did reference to us that you didn't recommend it, but at the same time, we see how you make money. How did you already have it mapped out ahead of time, like when you assumed when you were going to start getting paid on those deals, or did you just kind of go into it and say that I know at some point I'm going to get paid?
Well, I was in a position where today, if I was in that same kind of deal with the income I have today, they don't give you loans as easily when you're a financially position where you're getting your money from rents and things. But I had a job that was secure. I had worked at the college since 1965. I started in real estate in 1980. So I had a 15-year situation and I was tenured. So my income was solid and I could learn to live on less than what I made. That was the best thing that I had to learn, because I'll never forget when I went from the high school to the college was the first time I could have some money taken out and put into savings. And that was back, when I'm in my 25, 38 years old. And what was fascinating is every time we built up a little money, we took it and we bought a new TV, bought a new car. We did this, we went on a trip. We spent the money. So the pile kept getting restarted. And once I learned to not restart my savings and only put it into an asset that would go up. And I think one of the best things I ever learned from Peter Fortunato is if you would control a certain amount of real estate and be able to keep it for long term and it never went up. And I'll never forget, I'm in the Hacienda Hotel right up by LAX. We're counting 13 airplanes flying in, talking with Jimmy Napier. And I remember, and now it's all commercial, but in those days it was houses. I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, $100,000. I said, that's $1 million. And if I could control $1 million and at break even, never raise the rent, but the rent stayed enough to pay off those loans, 30 years later, I'm worth $1 million. So if you really, the most important thing I think is, do you amortize? I've got two wonderful people I really think the world of. I can't get them to buy something. They're renting every month. They're renting in the 2,000 range. If they were paying that 2,000 for ownership, they'd be amortizing, say, $300-400 a month off of the loan. And the best thing you can remember is I learned this from my mom. She didn't really teach it, but it was obvious what was going on. She had no car payment and no house payment when she got elderly. If you could be in that position, life is a lot easier. My son and I once figured out you could live, this is years ago, on $1,000 a month. Well, if you have no house payment, no car payment, and you're just getting Social Security, you're okay. But if you still have a house payment and a car payment, or you're paying rent or whatever you're doing, you've got a real difficult life.
Thank you.
I think I've said enough.
We don't have to be super formal. If anybody else has any questions, go ahead and unmute, or comments or ideas.
What does the ELF philosophy stand for again?
Easy, lucrative, and fun. And I tell you, we've had a lot of fun, but it's been lucrative and it was a lot easier than you think. It looks scary when you start. But I personally think if you really want to learn this business, get on a gosh darn plane, fly to Tampa, get in the same hotel where Pete's teaching, take that class. You're going to come home and say, I don't know what I learned. And then you're sitting in front of somebody, your brain's got it, but you don't realize it. And I sat in front of people and my God, and I went back one time, I think 4th or 5th time, and I literally have changed the book where he's talking about a case study. And I go, oh my God, that's the Sacramento Street house. And we turned the page, my God, that's Monrovia. And I did that for 4 different pages. I didn't understand what he was talking about, but when something came up just about like it, my brain knew how to solve it. I don't know how it works, but just trust yourself. He is such a great teacher, and you got a chance to still hear Pete. You got to go.
Hey, Pete, it's your point.
Yeah,
You've probably taken all the classes you need to take. So you never take any classes, do you?
I take every class I get a chance to take. Except for the short period of time there where the government made it just impossible for people to go out and better themselves. I've taken a class every single month since 1966.
That's a lot of classes.
Well, I've been listening to Jack tonight. I was at dinner earlier today with a young man who's 42 years old. He bought his first house when he was 19. He has 4 rental houses that pay for his lifestyle today. And he's done 3 121s that generated $1 million in tax-free cash, which made sure he didn't need to work too terribly hard.
Tell him what section 121 means.
So Jack just did the whole thing on 1034 and 121. He lived in the house for 2 years and 1 second and sold it and made a profit that was tax paid by the government.
Love that.
I mean, most
Jack,
people in 22 years, that's 7 deals.
You don't have to do a lot, do you?
You just got to keep breathing.
Hey, Coach, I think that was the best description you said of Pete's class in Tampa. You don't know what you learned, but your mind retained it.
Yeah, it did. I mean, if I had to teach, if I had to share what he taught the first year, I went on and said, I don't know what he said. I could not believe
I'm
it.
not good. Yeah, thanks.
No, Pete, you got to realize Pete, you know I'm not the sharpest guy on the block. That's the problem. You know, you don't have to be brilliant to be able to get in this business. I'm a dummy when you get right down to it. I just will work harder than most people. If you'll work harder, you'll be amazed how you can do it, because I'm not that smart at this stuff. I just have done it for a long time, and I listen. And you know what's interesting right now, still on this meeting, and I see him smiling. Wait, when you look at him, you don't see him because he goes back into the green. But the man is 90 years old.
Great.
He is unbelievable. But he's always trying to be somewhere where he can listen to everybody, and he's still learning. And he started, I can't tell you more about it, but he started with nothing also. He's one of those guys that we start with nothing and we build a little something, maybe $10 to start with. So,
Coach, why is it that those of us who have taken Pete's classes, and we've taken them more than one time, why are we so slow when we come out of his particular classes?
say that again.
How come we are so slow in learning when we come out of Pete's classes?
Well, we have to be, you and I have the same problem. We swam breaststroke in college.
Well, the thing is, we have to take it over and over again.
But too much water went in our ears, you know. But you guys realize how much fun's going on amongst the 4 or 5 people talking? It's easy, it's lucrative and fun. But I was talking to my best friend today about something. He's running the ski seminar for me this year. And what's interesting is I said, you know, the greatest thing that happened to us when we took these classes, and he and I met at a Jack Miller, John Schaub making it big on little deals back in '81. And I'm going to tell you, the best part about it is all the friendships that you get and all the fun you have with these people. The money, yeah, the money's been great, but I think the friendships and your friends are the most important thing you get out of this. So you need to really try to get good at this. But the key is you got to put activity to it. You've got to go out in the next week to 2-3 weeks and try to do something you heard tonight. Do something. If nothing else, the easy thing is write down everything you spend for the next month. That you can do for sure. And if you don't do that, then coming and spending your evening tonight, you know, it'll really be amazing.
Jack, Heather Olson taught me an interesting trick for torturing youngsters.
Go ahead.
You load 50 years. You talk to some 20-year-old, load 50 years into the calculator. So it's 600 months, 15%. Start with 0, put in $500 a month. What's that grow up to? 15%.
Anybody else trying to do it?
68 million.
Pretty darn close to 69, I think.
Yeah, it's off like $4.
Yeah.
Now,
Damn.
what happens if you don't start for a year? Change 600 to 588, Joseph.
And what interest rate did you say you're using, Andy?
15, because anybody can get 15.
No, not anybody. They have to get
Just
out. and work
tax
for it.
lien certificates.
They have to work for it. They have to do something.
What's it cost you to lose a year, Joseph?
So you're at 59 million now. So that cost you, what was the original?
69 million.
69 million.
Jeez, that's 10 million right there.
When you
Yeah,
youngsters
no.
delay, when you youngsters delay for 1 year your start, it costs you $10 million.
Don't let that discourage you from starting though.
Gotta start. Max,
Yeah,
Yes.
you got your IRA funded?
mine?
I
No, not
did.
Jack. Max.
Okay.
I almost did, but I've been meaning to have to do some technical stuff. I mailed it in wrong.
Oh,
Yeah,
Are you related to
Sorry.
Marta?
I am. I'm her son.
He's Roddy's brother.
So I've got to correct it. I've got to mail in the proper information again because I messed it up, and I got an email back. But I'm trying to do that right now.
Is everybody in the room gone to handsoffmyira.com and emailed those
Yes.
8 important people? Do it again tomorrow.
Okay.
I think there were a couple of questions in the chat. There was Bobby was asking a question about what was the time frame between the first purchase and the second purchase. And then somebody would like to know where Corey is. I would like to know as well.
I missed those
So
things.
Jack, what was the different? How long between your first house and your second house?
Let me think. First one was August of 80. Second one was 81. In fact, it's a cute story. I went to an academy meeting. I had committed to this guy. I was going to buy his house. They tell me they're not going to fund a loan. I go to the academy meeting on Tuesday. The guy was counting on the money for Friday to buy his new house in Washington. And my integrity was online because I wasn't able to perform. And Don Tosher, a great friend, said, you need to go in and talk to your banker. This is the way banking should be, is exactly what happened. I left that meeting. I went in and saw my banker. He said to the number 2 guy, give Jack $20,000. The guy said, come back in 3 hours. I walked out 3 hours later with the $20,000 to close the deal. No financial statement, no security, but my integrity was on the line. I gave him 5 statements, what I needed it for, how soon I needed it, what I was using it for, what was my primary source of repayment, what was my secondary source of repayment. That was taught to me by Don Tosher, who is really a class act man. So it's amazing. That was the second one, 1981. And if I hadn't been able to close that, I don't know what would have happened. I also
Thanks, Jack.
probably would have quit when my wife left, except that I had met people in the academy and they dragged me to classes like Pete's, John's and Jack's and Jimmy's and Don Tosher, and made me go and study for those 2 years I didn't do anything. And then I started again in I think 83. So it's really been good.
Isn't it funny how many of us had to get drug into the classes?
Yeah.
And thankfully, we had mentors that were willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think also we developed friendships and we used to talk about deals and how to make them better.
So true.
I think my best friends are all in the trade.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
If I had my druthers who I was going to sit around in a bar stool with and spend an afternoon, it'd be somebody that does what we do.
That makes you such a boring person.
I know.
So I've been told.
What everyone says.
All right, hey, everybody, you feel free to hang out. I'm going to transfer it over to Andy here in a second. But I just wanted to thank Jack for coming out. It's been
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks, Jack.
If you guys want to, again, I put it in the chat a couple times, but if you want a copy of the PowerPoint tonight, email Jack at commonwealthoc@gmail.com. We were recording. It'll be up on Facebook and YouTube here pretty quick. So, and again, our exchangers meeting is tomorrow at 11. It is on Zoom and in person. If you go to meetup.com/IEREIC, it should be on there as well. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody coming out, especially Jack. Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Andy, and everybody have a good night. Feel free to hang out as long as Andy wants to keep the room open. Okay. Thank you.
We will